Chapter 1. The Mistake. It started with a spreadsheet, not even a high-stakes one, at least not on the surface, just a quarterly forecast for one of our mid-tier clients. Routine, predictable. I opened it out of habit more than anything, intending to glance through the numbers before our check-in that afternoon. But something looked off. I scrolled back to the top, then down again, watching the totals shift column by column. One formula wasn't referencing the right row. Another had hard-coded values where there should have been linked cells. By the time I traced it all the way through, my stomach had dropped. The client's projected spend was inflated by nearly $250,000. I double-checked the version history. The file had been uploaded late the night before, 11:42 p.m., by my boss, Madeline Crane. Of course it had. Madeline liked to work late and loudly, the kind of leader who sent emails at midnight and expected replies by dawn. She thrived on appearing indispensable, poised in front of clients, perfectly polished in meetings. But when it came to details, that was someone else's job, usually mine. For 3 years, I'd been the guy behind the curtain. I cleaned up decks before they hit the boardroom. I fixed budgets on the fly. I rewrote half her talking points once, 15 minutes before a live webinar. She always smiled after, always took the credit. I never really minded, not until now, because this wasn't a cosmetic error. This could blow up a contract, and if the client noticed before we did, the blame wasn't going to roll uphill. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Then I started rebuilding. I didn't tell Madeline. I didn't loop in finance. I just quietly opened a clean sheet, pulled the correct data, and rebuilt the forecast from the ground up. I ran 3 different models, just to be sure. Then I rewrote the executive summary and sent a fresh version to the client with a brief, neutral subject line. Updated forecast, revised internal model. The body of the email was short, professional. No names, no finger pointing. Just a simple note thanking them for their patience as we refined internal accuracy ahead of today's sync. The client replied 6 minutes later. Thanks for the update. Looks solid. Appreciate the attention to detail. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. That should have been it. No harm, no foul. Mistake caught. Client reassured. Quiet win. But the thing about cleaning up someone else's mess, especially when they don't know it's theirs, is that it doesn't always earn you points. Sometimes, it earns you suspicion. And in Madeline's world, suspicion was almost always fatal. Chapter 2. Damage control. By the time Madeline walked into the office that morning, the crisis had already been averted. The file was fixed. The client was calm. The numbers made sense again. But she didn't know that yet. I watched her from across the open floor plan as she breezed past the front desk, sunglasses still on, latte in hand, phone pressed to her ear. Designer heels clicking like punctuation with every step. She didn't stop to say hello. She never did. I turned back to my screen and kept my face neutral. 10 minutes later, her voice rang out across the team pod. Can I see you in my office? No name, no eye contact, but everyone knew who she meant. Her office was glass-walled, perched like a command tower over our row of desks. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Madeline didn't look up. She was scrolling through something on her laptop. The air smelled like citrus and pressure. You touched the forecast. She said flatly. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. There was a formula error. I caught it this morning. I corrected the model and sent the client an updated version before our sync. She finally looked up. Her expression was unreadable, like someone inspecting a scratch on a new car. Next time, she said slowly, you let me know before you take initiative. We don't want clients thinking we're disorganized. I almost laughed, but I didn't. She hadn't seen the mistake. She hadn't realized it was hers. She was upset because I'd moved faster than her, and because the client knew about it before she did. I was just trying to prevent confusion, I said carefully. The email was neutral, no names, just a clean correction. She stared at me a moment longer, then smiled, that tight, PR-ready smile she used when reporters asked about budget cuts. Well, she said, standing up and smoothing her blazer, at least it didn't go public. Let's keep it that way. I nodded and left her office. As I sat back down at my desk, my phone buzzed. An email from Madeline. She'd forwarded the updated forecast to the broader leadership team, attaching the corrected file I created, with no mention of me. Her subject line read, "Adjusted forecast, resolved overnight." That's when I knew. She was taking the win. Chapter 3. HR Knows It. Started with a calendar invite I hadn't expected. Follow-up performance alignment review, sent by HR. No context, just a date, a time, and 2 names, mine and Elise Chan, senior HR business partner. I stared at it for a second too long. We weren't in performance review season. I hadn't missed any benchmarks. There had been no formal complaints, nothing to flag, unless I clicked into my work drive, reopened the forecast files, reread my email to the client. Everything was clean, professional, accountable. Still, something didn't sit right. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Madeline didn't mention it. She barely spoke to me for 2 days, except in meetings where she nodded like everything was fine. Polished, pleased. But the silence was too precise, like someone tiptoeing around their own tripwire. When Thursday came, I walked into HR with my laptop in hand and my gut in knots. Elise greeted me with a tight smile and motioned toward a chair. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't make small talk. "Thanks for coming, Marcus," she said, folding her hands over a slim manila folder. "We've received some concerns regarding your recent handling of client deliverables, specifically documentation related to the Q3 forecast for Argent Group." My ears buzzed. "There seems to be a versioning issue," she continued. "The file on record doesn't match what the client received, and we're not seeing an internal approval chain for the correction." I blinked. Because the correction wasn't approved. It was urgent and necessary. I flagged a calculation error that. Elise held up a hand. "I understand, but Madeline's version was submitted through formal channels. Yours wasn't." And there it was. Madeline had submitted her original version to the leadership archive, the one with the error. Then, after I fixed it and sent it to the client, she scrubbed the history, buried the mistake, let mine hang out in the open like an unauthorized edit. Now HR thought I had gone rogue. She said I compromised the chain of command, didn't she? I asked quietly. Elise didn't answer. Instead, she closed the folder and said, "We're still reviewing the full context. In the meantime, please don't make any further adjustments to client-facing documents without direct managerial approval." I left that meeting with a polite nod, a pit in my stomach, and the terrifying realization that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup. Chapter 4. The Setup. I didn't go straight home after the HR meeting. I walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction, grabbed a coffee I didn't want, and sat in a booth at a corner cafe where no one knew my name. The cup sat untouched for 20 minutes. I wasn't even thinking, just replaying everything. That file wasn't a mistake. Not anymore. It was a trap. By the time I made it back to the office, the place was mostly cleared out. Just the hum of old overhead lights and the cleaning crew in the far hallway. My badge still worked. So did my access to the internal drive, for now. I sat at my desk, logged in, and pulled up the folder where we kept all the client-facing files. Argent Group, Q3 forecast. Madeline's version was there. Flagged final in bold all caps, time-stamped, locked, perfectly sealed with a digital signature and a neatly backdated approval workflow. Hers and only hers. It looked official. It looked clean. But it was wrong. I scrolled to find mine, the version I'd spent that morning rebuilding line by line. It was still there, technically, buried in a subfolder labeled Drafts Internal. But the version history told a different story. My name was gone from the edit log. No autosaves after 9:52 a.m. No metadata indicating who had opened or altered the file after I sent it. Just nothing. Like I'd never touched it at all. I opened my Slack to check the messages I'd sent finance. Quick questions about the source data, confirmation of the spend categories, time-stamped before I made the correction. They were gone. The whole thread. Vanished. Even my private notes to myself were missing from the Notepad app I always kept minimized. I never deleted those. Ever. But the worst part? I realized I had seen this exact pattern before. 2 years ago, A project manager named Tara left abruptly after a compliance concern surfaced. We never got the full story, just a vague goodbye email and a shuffled workload. But I remembered hearing her complain about files being changed after the fact, and no one believing her. Back then, I assumed it was a one-off, a mistake, maybe even on her. Now I wasn't so sure. Because this wasn't passive. This wasn't a simple cover-up. This was surgical. Someone, and I didn't need to guess who, had gone into the system, deleted messages, renamed files, manipulated timestamps, and cleaned up every trail I might have used to prove what happened. And I'd walked right into it. I leaned back in my chair, the buzz of fluorescent lights suddenly deafening. My name was being erased, and I was still sitting at my desk, watching it happen in real time. My hands were still on the keyboard, but my body had gone cold. She wasn't just pinning the mistake on me. She was rewriting the narrative from scratch, and this time, I wasn't even a character in it. Chapter 5, The Tip. I was in the break room the next morning, half listening to the hiss of the espresso machine, when someone cleared their throat behind me. I turned, expecting small talk. Instead, it was Tasha from accounting, eyes wide, voice low. "Hey, you didn't hear this from me." That's how it started. She glanced around, made sure we were alone, and stepped in closer, like the walls could talk. I was in the printer room yesterday. Madeline and Carlos from Ops were in the back hallway. She didn't know I was there. I raised an eyebrow. "Okay." Tasha leaned in. She said she cleaned up the forecast mess, and that Marcus should be out by next week. Then she laughed and said, "He doesn't even know I saved over it." Classic. The words hit harder than I expected. I stood there holding my mug like it was the only thing keeping me upright. "She said my name?" I asked. "Full name," Tasha nodded. "Said you overstepped. Made her look bad, that she was prepping HR to move fast." I swallowed hard. "She's setting you up," Tasha continued, voice soft. "And if she's talking like that in public, she already thinks it's done." I looked at her, this quiet, observant woman who'd always flown under the radar, and realized she'd just risked her neck to warn me. "Why are you telling me this?" She didn't hesitate. "Because this company is full of people like her. But every now and then, someone decent tries to do the right thing and gets crushed for it. I'm tired of watching that happen." I nodded, but didn't speak. Couldn't. As she turned to leave, she tossed one final comment over her shoulder. "Whatever proof you've got, back it up, twice. She's good at covering her tracks, but not perfect." The moment she disappeared down the hall, I felt it. Not relief, not panic, resolve. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. She was coming for me. And now, I was coming back for her. Chapter 6, Terminated. They didn't even look me in the eye. It was Friday. Gray skies, cold coffee, end of quarter tension thick in the air. I got the calendar invite at 9:07 a.m. Quick sync, 9:30, conf room 4C. No subject, no details, just my name, Madeline's, and Elise from HR. By the time I walked in, the room was already too quiet. Elise had a notepad in front of her. Madeline was scrolling her phone, looking bored. Like this was just another task to cross off her list. I sat, waited. Madeline didn't waste time. "We're moving forward with the separation," she said, like she was ordering a salad. "There have been ongoing concerns with your alignment to process protocols, and after reviewing recent discrepancies." "What discrepancies?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. Madeline gave a tight smile, then looked at Elise. Elise took over. "As we discussed earlier this week, there's been confusion surrounding your involvement in several key deliverables. This has impacted cross-functional trust and created unnecessary friction. That was corporate for, you embarrassed the wrong person. There were no complaints before I corrected that forecast," I said. "None." Elise didn't flinch. "This decision is final." She slid a slim folder across the table. My exit paperwork, I assumed. I didn't touch it. Madeline stood up, smoothing her blazer. "We'll be processing your departure as a performance-related termination. Your badge access ends today. No severance, no transition period, just out." I let the silence stretch a little too long before speaking. "You know I fixed your mistake, right?" I said, eyes locked on Madeline. "You can lie to them, you can scrub the files, but you know." Her smile didn't budge, but her fingers twitched slightly at her side. "I'd recommend focusing on your next chapter," she said. "There's no upside to dwelling." I stood, picked up the folder without opening it, and walked out. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. Just gathered my things. Quiet, mechanical. But as I rode down in the elevator, I wasn't angry. I was focused. Because if Madeline thought that was the end of it, she didn't know what I still had. Chapter 7, The Archive. I didn't go home. I drove past my apartment, past the downtown skyline, and into the quiet part of the city, where the buildings got older and the streets felt less like an algorithm. Ended up in the parking lot of a nondescript co-working space I used years ago when I freelanced between jobs. Still had a keycard, still had a desk in the back corner. I needed a place without company Wi-Fi. I needed time and memory, because something had been scratching at the back of my mind since Tasha pulled me aside. The old backup system. 3 years ago, when our division's servers kept crashing during peak season, IT had temporarily routed all shared drive files through a mirrored archive, a short-term redundancy system stored on a private cloud drive. Most people forgot about it once the new infrastructure launched. But I didn't, because I'd helped test it, and I never removed the sync tool from my work laptop. So when I opened my personal hard drive, plugged in the device I hadn't touched in months, and let the sync start pulling, I held my breath. And there it was, buried in a dusty subfolder, under layers of auto-cached files and metadata tags. A full, time-stamped version of the forecast spreadsheet. My version. Every revision, every formula change, every comment tracked with my initials and the exact time I made it, including one line Madeline had deleted. "Hey, just caught this variance. Need to confirm with finance before this goes out." There was more. Archived Slack logs. The message I sent Tasha, the one I sent to finance at 7:04 a.m., the one where I asked about the broken formula, still intact. Every deleted ping, every edit scrubbed from the company's official server still lived in the backup. She hadn't found it because she didn't know it existed. And now I had proof. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, as realization settled over me. She thought I was finished. She thought she'd wiped the board clean. But all she'd done was leave the wrong piece behind. Chapter 8. Allies in Strange Places. I didn't trust many people at the company. Scratch that. I didn't trust anyone who still worked there. But I knew someone who didn't. Darren Cho had left 6 months earlier after a messy exit from the IT department. Rumor was he'd called out a security lapse during a leadership offsite and got quietly pushed out. But Darren was smart, paranoid, exacting, the kind of guy who backed up everything and never signed a company NDA without modifying the language. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I still had his number. I texted him one line, "Need to recover metadata from a ghost system. You in?" He replied 3 minutes later, "Meet me at the warehouse on Ash. Bring snacks." The warehouse was a converted makerspace he rented with some friends. 3D printers, soldering irons, and enough recycled tech parts to build a second internet. He didn't say hello when I walked in, just pointed to the table and waved for me to hand over the drive. "What are we looking at?" he asked, fingers already flying over his keyboard. "Mirrored archive from 2022. Project folder. I need untouched logs, metadata, anything she couldn't scrub." Darren whistled low. "She as in Madeline Crane?" I raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" He smirked. "Let's just say I wasn't her biggest fan. She once asked if she could have admin access just for aesthetics. I said no. She filed a complaint. I left." He clicked through the folders, pulling up the revision history. "Damn, you weren't kidding. This is clean. Untouched. Look at these timestamps. She never even pinged this archive. She scrubbed everything on the main system and thought she won." "She didn't," I said quietly. Darren paused, then leaned back in his chair. "You going to legal?" "No. Internal routes are tainted. I want this to hit where it hurts." He nodded slowly. "You'll need a clean copy. Redacted names, but traceable metadata. Want it encrypted?" "Yes. And I need the Slack logs too, the ones they deleted. Anything she touched, I want it recovered." Darren grinned. "This is why I keep backups and friends with vendettas." I didn't smile back. Not yet. Not until it was all documented, all verified. already. Because Madeline hadn't just made a mistake. She'd made an enemy with a backup. Chapter 9. The Leak. It didn't feel like revenge. Not yet. It felt like exhaustion. Like red eyes, stale breath, and the hollow hum of a borrowed office space at 2 a.m. My fingers ached from typing. Darren hadn't spoken in hours, lost in a trance of keystrokes and encryption settings. The only sounds were the clicking of our keyboards and the distant hum of the ventilation unit overhead. But something had shifted. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. We'd spent the entire weekend building the case. Darren pulled data from the Ghost Archive. I wrote the story it told. Together, we constructed a timeline so precise it couldn't be denied. Every file, every message, every false flag Madeline had planted, traced, time-stamped, and digitally preserved. The revised forecast model, we had it. The version log showing my edits, documented. The Slack messages she deleted, recovered and matched against the internal retention policy she violated to erase them. Even the metadata from her submission to leadership, where she uploaded my file but stripped my name from the properties, sat glowing on my desktop like a digital confession. "She'll deny everything," I said quietly. Darren didn't look up. "Then make sure the people you send this to won't believe her." He was right. Going to HR would be like handing the files straight to her. And legal? That department reported to the same executives who called her a rising star in last month's earnings call. No, this had to go above them. The board of directors had a whistleblower portal, encrypted, external, used mostly for compliance tips and investor fraud concerns. But I'd read the policy. Internal misrepresentation of financial data tied to client accounts fell under their jurisdiction. So that's where I started. I drafted a cover letter, dry, professional, anonymous, detailing the breach. I cited policy violations, altered deliverables, and reputational risk. I referenced the Q3 forecast and attached supporting documentation, emails, Slack threads, side-by-side screenshots of the doctored files. Then I uploaded everything to the board's secure Dropbox. Click, confirm, sent. And still, it didn't feel like enough. Because Madeline had always been more than just protected. She was adored, marketed, carefully curated. The company's golden brand whisperer. If this stayed internal, someone would make it go away. So I took a breath and opened a second window. This time, I went wide. I drafted a second version of the packet, redacted names, blurred logos, but the same chain of events. I encrypted it and sent it to 2 journalists, one who covered tech sector whistleblower stories, and another who had once profiled our company in a glowing 3-page spread that read like a press release. I included a simple message. The story you missed last year is the one that actually mattered. The voice behind the turnaround, she stole it. I didn't sign it. I didn't have to, because the document spoke louder than I ever could. And somewhere between the send button and the silence that followed, I felt something settle. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of something sharp, something irreversible. Chapter 10, Viral. It started with a Slack message. Not to me. I was long gone by then, but to a friend who still worked in sales. She texted me a screenshot. "Yo, is this real?" Attached was a photo of a Slack thread in the company's industry news channel. Someone had pasted a link to an article, short, sharp, just published. Director accused of data manipulation in client-facing forecasts. The article didn't name me. It didn't need to. It focused on a high-level employee who allegedly altered version history to cover up a major client reporting error, and the anonymous whistleblower who submitted irrefutable evidence to both the board and the press. 3 paragraphs in, there was a side-by-side screenshot, my forecast on the left, Madeline's version on the right, timestamps, metadata, clear as glass. The group chat exploded. By noon, half the company had seen the article. By 2 o'clock, The original post was deleted from Slack, but not before someone reposted it in hashtag off-topic and tagged the CEO. Someone else found the Dropbox link and shared it anonymously. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the conversations changed. Madeline wasn't the one who saved the Argent account anymore. She was the one whose files didn't line up, the one whose Slack access mysteriously went dark mid-afternoon. By 4:00 p.m., her photo was pulled from the company website. The leadership bio page refreshed, quietly without comment. And by 6:00, another article dropped. This one had quotes. "We take data integrity seriously," a company spokesperson said. "Following internal review, appropriate actions have been taken." Translation: she was gone, not reassigned, not on leave, gone. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the news feed refreshing every few minutes, watching the wreckage spread. Emails, tweets, comments from people I didn't know, former coworkers, ex-clients, quiet voices that had stayed silent for years. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. I always wondered what happened to Tara from Ops. Now it makes sense why she never let anyone touch her decks. The narrative was shifting, not just away from me, but against her. No NDA, no spin, no savior edit from a loyal executive. Just the truth, laid bare, click by click. And it was only just beginning. Chapter 11, The Reversal. The email hit my inbox at 7:43 a.m. Subject, follow-up request, internal review response. It was from Elise Chan. No greeting, no fluff. Just a request to meet at your earliest availability to discuss next steps following your recent disclosure. That's how she worded it. Disclosure, like it had been volunteered nicely. Like they hadn't tried to bury me under it first. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I shut the laptop, let them wait. By the time I walked into the office 3 days later, the energy had shifted. Reception was quiet. Too quiet. People looked up when I passed, not with pity this time, but something closer to recognition. A few nodded. One woman from legal gave me the kind of half-smile that said, "You made it further than most." HR had booked a small conference room, not the cold one from before. This one had actual light. Elise stood when I entered. So did a man I didn't recognize. Gray suit, sharp tie, eyes like a hawk. Someone from risk management, I guessed. Or maybe legal affairs. His name tag said Dan. "Thank you for coming in, Marcus," Elise said, gesturing toward a chair. "We appreciate your cooperation." Cooperation? I sat, folding my hands in my lap, calm, collected. Not because I felt calm, but because I wanted them to see what that looked like. Dan cleared his throat. "We'd like to formally acknowledge the information you submitted," he said. "After a thorough internal investigation, we verified the integrity of your documentation and confirmed that the actions taken against you were based on falsified reporting." Translation: you were right, we were wrong, and now we're trying to act like this was a collaborative resolution. Elise looked at me carefully. "We understand this experience has likely damaged your trust in our internal systems. We'd like the opportunity to discuss options, including reinstatement or a potential transition with severance and extended benefits." A peace offering. But it wasn't about the job anymore. Not for me. I'd already made my decision. I wasn't coming back. Not after what they let happen. Not after how silent they stayed while Madeline rewrote the story in real time. Still, I stayed in the meeting long enough to hear them out. I let them say all the things they should have said months ago. I let them dangle the compensation, the apology, the NDA that they strongly encouraged as part of closure. And when they asked if I needed time to consider the offer, I smiled for the first time in weeks. "No," I said. "I'm good." Then I stood, walked out, no folder in my hand this time, no shame in my steps, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth wasn't buried. Not this time. Chapter 12. Live playback. The boardroom was smaller than I expected. Not physically, the walls were still polished glass and the table long enough to host an arbitration, but smaller in presence, less intimidating. Maybe because this time, I wasn't the one on trial. There were 6 of them, 3 in person, 3 dialed in via video, and no Madeline. She'd been invited to submit a written statement. I'd already seen the memo. It was 3 paragraphs long and read like someone trying to plead incompetence without admitting intent. A careful apology, a quiet exit. But it didn't matter. The files spoke louder. They asked me to walk them through it, not just the whistleblower packet, but the whole thing, start to finish. So I did. I started with the forecast, Project Argent, the version she sent, the one I corrected, the messages she deleted, the approval chain she fabricated, the HR complaint that followed, based on her version of the timeline. Then I opened the folder labeled Archive Unedited, and I projected the proof. Each file had a timestamp, each comment tracked. The board watched in silence as I walked them through every step, the Slack messages recovered, the cached version logs from the old backup system, the metadata showing exactly when Madeline submitted the file, and how she'd stripped my name from the document properties just minutes before. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't editorialize. I let the evidence speak. At one point, a board member leaned forward and asked, "And no one in your chain of command caught this?" I looked him in the eye. They didn't want to. Another asked if I was considering legal action. I shrugged. Not if this stays public. That was always the point. When I was done, the room sat in a kind of stunned quiet. No one clapped. No one nodded. But I saw it in their faces, a quiet, dawning awareness that someone inside the machine had documented the whole thing, had outmaneuvered the story they were fed, and for once, they weren't being asked to clean it up. They were being asked to own it. I closed the last file, unplugged the drive, and stood. "Thank you for your time," I said. Then I walked out, not for revenge, not even for redemption, but because I had finally said it all, out loud, on record, and they had no choice now but to listen. Chapter 13, She Implodes. They didn't announce her termination. No email, no all-hands meeting, no Slack message with carefully worded corporate condolences, just absence. The kind that settles into a space so completely you realize it was always coming. By Monday morning, her glass-walled office sat hollow. The whiteboard was wiped clean, her nameplate gone. The branded tumbler she used to carry everywhere, even into client calls, now sat abandoned on the window ledge, half full, like someone had left in a rush and never planned to return. People noticed. Not just because she was gone, but because of how fast she disappeared. There wasn't even a whisper from senior leadership. Not a single statement addressing what the rest of the company already knew, that the woman who once dominated quarterly presentations and controlled the narrative with ruthless precision had been cut loose like dead weight. But the story didn't stay quiet for long. By Tuesday, screenshots of her resignation letter made their way into group chats and anonymous forums. It was filled with empty platitudes. After much reflection, new professional horizons, gratitude for the opportunity. But everyone could see the subtext. She hadn't left. She'd been pushed. The company line held, at first, but the ripple effects didn't stop. One of our highest-profile clients, Argent Group, quietly pulled their Q4 renewal for unrelated internal reasons. Another, a multinational tech firm Madeline had championed for years, suddenly requested a full audit of past deliverables. And then came the rumors. Someone in risk leaked that Madeline had been under informal review for months, that this wasn't her first file manipulation. Just the first time someone documented it well enough to bring the whole machine down. People started talking, out loud now, about Tara, the project manager who vanished 2 years ago after questioning a budget sheet. About Alex in Ops, whose performance issues came after he refused to backdate a report. All roads led back to her. She hadn't just failed, she'd patterned it. In private, I heard from a former colleague who now worked in legal. She said Madeline tried to argue she'd been misunderstood, that collaborative drafts had gotten mixed, that my version of the truth was taken out of context. But the board wasn't buying it. Not this time. They'd seen the logs, heard the audio, watched the playback. There was no unseeing it, and that scared her, because Madeline Crane didn't fear failure. She feared irrelevance. She built her entire career on being seen as the irreplaceable one, the brilliant fixer, the star. And now, she was radioactive. By Friday, even her LinkedIn was locked. Her bio removed the company name. Her endorsements vanished. A new headline appeared beneath her name, bland, desperate, seeking strategic consulting opportunities, growth partner, change agent. But the likes were gone, the comments dry, her old supporters quiet. The same people who once shared her every post with clapping emojis and "so proud to work with you" were suddenly nowhere. She was a ghost. One of the interns posted a TikTok that went briefly viral before being taken down. Just a photo of Madeline walking out of the office garage, shot from behind, her once perfect stride faltering under the weight of a box in her arms. The caption read, "When you build your whole brand on being untouchable and someone finally touches back." Harsh, maybe, but accurate. No public apology, no last-minute redemption arc, no follow-up podcast where she owned her mistakes and rebranded it as growth. Just a quiet fall from a very tall pedestal. And for the first time since this started, the silence wasn't mine to carry. Chapter 14, Clean Break. It didn't hit me until I handed back my badge. The plastic felt weightless in my hand. Just a strip of metal and laminate. But for 5 years, it had opened every door that mattered. Meeting rooms, client floors, late-night coffee runs when the world felt on fire. I'd carried it like it meant something. Now, I placed it on the receptionist's desk without a word. She looked up, blinking. "You're not staying?" I smiled, small. "Not today." Technically, they'd reinstated me, quietly, full back pay. An offer to return to my old role, or move laterally to something with less client-facing stress. They even threw in a 90-day transition stipend and therapy coverage, which, I'll admit, was a first. I turned it all down. Not out of pride, out of principle. They didn't protect me. They protected the story, until they couldn't anymore. And I wasn't about to rebuild my career in the shadow of people who only saw my value once the headlines hit. So I walked out. No press. No performance post on LinkedIn. Just a final pass through the lobby, the glass door sliding open one last time. Outside, the city buzzed like it always had. No one slowed. No one stopped. That was the thing about survival. It rarely looked dramatic. Sometimes it was just walking away. I moved my things out of storage that weekend. Boxed up the old binders, the client swag, the notebooks full of meeting notes that no longer meant anything. The last thing I packed was the hard drive, the one Darren and I used to rebuild everything. I didn't destroy it. I didn't need to. It was already archived, backed up, documented in all the right places, just in case. Not for revenge, not anymore, for closure, for the next person they try to erase. Epilogue, the right inbox. 3 weeks passed. No more Slack notifications, no last-minute meetings, no polite gaslighting disguised as performance feedback. My days were quieter now. Spent reorganizing books I hadn't touched in years, walking longer routes to nowhere in particular, and sleeping deeper than I had in months. There was no victory parade, no sudden enlightenment, just silence, and stillness, and breath. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, an email arrived. Subject line, "We saw what you did." For a split second, my pulse spiked. I almost didn't open it. I thought it might be a threat, a final warning from someone I've overlooked. But it wasn't. It was from a name I didn't recognize, but a domain I did. Redwell Stratagem, a consulting firm I'd quietly admired for years, known for their ethics-first culture, no-nonsense leadership, and for actually meaning the things companies like mine only pretended to. The email was short. "Hi Marcus. We followed the events that unfolded at Argent. Your decision to document, escalate, and ultimately speak out didn't go unnoticed. We're building a new arm of our strategic integrity group, one focused on rebuilding trust in high-risk client relationships. Your experience is exactly what we're looking for. No formal application required. Just a conversation. If you're open to it, we'd love to talk." I sat there staring at the screen, rain ticking softly against the windows, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission to hope again. They weren't offering a pity roll. They were offering purpose. Not because I burned bridges, but because I refused to let someone else light the match and blame me for the fire. I reread the email once, then twice, and for the first time in a long while, I clicked reply.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.